You look around and think the world's gone dumb, but that's not it. The real danger isn't ignorance, it's intelligence without resistance. Minds that surrendered the steering wheel, not because they're evil, but because it's easier. Easier to follow than to think, easier to repeat than to reflect. And that's the enemy we rarely see coming. You know that friend who shares conspiracy videos but has 2 degrees? Or the coworker who parrots slogans as if they're gospel, never once asking, is this actually true? That's not stupidity in the traditional sense. That's functional stupidity. When people stop thinking for themselves and start outsourcing their judgment to the loudest voice in the room. If you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. This is exactly what Dietrich Bonhoeffer saw in Nazi Germany. He wasn't some armchair philosopher throwing ideas from a safe distance. He was a German pastor surrounded by educated, cultured people, teachers, priests, scientists, who slowly morphed into tools of destruction. Not because they were brainwashed, but because they chose comfort over clarity, loyalty over logic, consensus over conscience. Bonhoeffer wrote something chilling from his prison cell in 1943. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. And he wasn't talking about a lack of IQ. He meant something deeper, darker, a force that infects the mind, dulls moral judgment, and makes people immune to reason. The scariest part? These people often believe they're doing good. That's why it spreads so easily. This kind of stupidity isn't loud or messy. It's quiet, polite, rational sounding. It wears a tie, it smiles in meetings, and it ruins lives. The truth? It's not just out there. It's in you. It's in me. Every time we avoid the discomfort of thinking, every time we'd rather be right than be real. And if we don't face that, we become exactly what we fear, without even noticing it. Picture this. A man in a lab coat tells you to press a button. On the other side of a wall, someone screams in pain. You hesitate. He insists. You press it again. The screams get worse. You look uncomfortable, but he says, the experiment requires that you continue. So you do. This isn't fiction. It happened over and over in 1961 at Yale University. Psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to test obedience. The results? 65% of participants were willing to administer what they thought were lethal electric shocks to another human being, just because someone in authority told them to. They weren't monsters. They were ordinary people, like you, like me. Milgram's study became infamous, but what's even more terrifying is how easily we forget it, how much we want to believe, I would never do that. But history and psychology say otherwise. Bonhoeffer didn't need a lab to see this. He watched it happen in the streets, in churches, in classrooms. He saw a nation of thinkers turn into followers, not because they lost their intelligence, because they lost their resistance. When you stop questioning, stop pushing back, stop asking, why? Your brain doesn't go quiet. It gets hijacked by slogans, by ideology, by the warm, deceptive comfort of groupthink. Milgram proved it. Bonhoeffer lived it. And now, we're repeating it. Only now, the lab coat is replaced by a trending post. The screaming is muted by a scroll. And the authority? It's an algorithm feeding your biases on loop. That's why Bonhoeffer's warning feels more urgent than ever. Stupidity is not a psychological defect. It is a moral failure. Think about that. It's not about how smart you are. It's about whether you're willing to think when it's hardest. Because if you're not, someone else will think for you. Let's get brutally honest for a second. Your ignorance is profitable. Not just convenient, profitable. There are companies, algorithms, and entire industries making billions off your emotional reactions and mental shortcuts. And they don't need you to be dumb. They just need you to stop thinking. Every time you react instead of reflect, someone gets paid. That viral post that triggered you, ad revenue, that sensational headline you didn't finish reading, clickbait income, that argument you had online that left you drained and confused, data harvested, engagement boosted. This isn't an accident. It's the architecture. Bonhoeffer warned us, stupidity isn't random. It's engineered. He saw how the Nazi regime didn't just suppress truth, they overwhelmed it. They created a culture where people stopped thinking not because they couldn't, but because it became too costly. Sound familiar? Scroll your feed. What do you see? outrage, certainty, simplicity. Everything designed to make you feel, not think. Algorithms don't want nuance. They want friction, emotion, division. That's how content goes viral, and how critical thought dies quietly in the background. Modern stupidity is efficient. It looks like multitasking. It feels like being informed. But really, it's drowning in information and starving for insight. Bonhoeffer saw this dynamic before the internet even existed. He wrote that stupidity benefits those in power, not because it makes people violent, but because it makes them obedient, predictable, easily swayed. And here's the harsh truth. The system doesn't care if you think. It only cares that you consume. That's why thinking critically today is more than self-improvement. It's an act of rebellion. So here's your first act of resistance. Turn off your notifications. Read one thing slowly, fully. Ask yourself, do I actually understand this? Because if you don't reclaim your mind, the system already has. Your mind isn't lazy. It's overwhelmed. And when it's overwhelmed, it does what any tired system does. It takes shortcuts. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is wired for survival, not truth. This is where functional stupidity thrives. Leon Festinger called it cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort we feel when reality challenges what we believe. And what does the brain do when it feels that discomfort? It protects the ego. It bends facts. It clings to certainty, even when the truth is screaming in your face. You've felt it. That moment when you see a fact that contradicts your opinion, and you scroll past it. That internal voice whispering, this doesn't feel right, but you ignore it. Because changing your mind isn't just hard, it feels like dying a little inside. Now add social pressure to the mix. Bonhoeffer noticed something long before psychologists confirmed it. Stupidity isn't just individual, it's social. Put a person in a group, and suddenly they'll abandon reason to avoid rejection. Solomon Asch proved this in the 1950s. People gave obviously wrong answers just to fit in. Now, fast forward to today, to curated feeds, echo chambers, outrage mobs, and tribal loyalty. Where being wrong publicly means humiliation, where disagreeing with your group feels like betrayal, where silence is safer than truth. This is how the mind gets caged, not with chains, but with likes, shares, and fear of being exiled. So, let me ask you, when was the last time you truly changed your mind? When was the last time you paused long enough to say, maybe I was wrong? If you can't remember, your mind might already be in captivity. And the worst part, it doesn't feel like a prison. It feels like comfort. You don't need a revolution. You need a moment. One quiet, uncomfortable moment where you decide to stop running from your own thoughts. That's how resistance begins. Not with a speech or a protest, but with a refusal. A refusal to blindly agree, to autopilot your beliefs, to let the crowd think for you. Bonhoeffer called it costly grace. The grace that doesn't come cheap, the kind that asks you to think, even when thinking hurts. Because real clarity doesn't feel like a dopamine hit. It feels like detox. Today, we confuse reaction with reason. We treat outrage like wisdom. We reward confidence, not competence. And yet, the most powerful thing you can do right now is hesitate, to pause before you repost, to question before you agree, to say, I don't know, in a world obsessed with certainty. That's not weakness, that's strength. Because every system around you wants you emotionally reactive and mentally compliant. Every swipe, every scroll, every headline is designed to bypass your logic and hijack your instincts. Bonhoeffer understood, the truly dangerous people aren't always the ones doing harm consciously. It's those who follow the crowd, convinced they're on the right side, too lazy or too scared to verify what they've joined. So, what's the antidote? Intellectual humility. The courage to admit, I might be wrong. The discipline to explore the other side. The resilience to hold space for discomfort without running from it. Here's something practical. This week, read something that opposes your core belief. Not to change your mind, but to prove it deserves to stay. If it can't hold up under scrutiny, it was never yours to begin with. Because the first step to thinking clearly is choosing to think at all. Dietrich Bonhoeffer didn't die because he was reckless. He died because he refused to think like everyone else. They offered him comfort, safety, silence. He chose resistance, thought, and truth. even when it meant a noose around his neck. His final words, moments before execution. This is the end. For me, the beginning of life. Now pause, because this isn't just history, it's prophecy. Bonhoeffer's real warning wasn't about Nazis or war. It was about what happens when intelligent people stop thinking for themselves, when comfort seduces the mind into surrender, when certainty becomes a drug, when we trade truth for tribe. And it's happening again, not in the streets, but in your pocket, in your feed, in your choices. Every day you have a decision to make. Will I think, or will I be thought for? Will I seek truth, or settle for what feels good? Will I dare to ask questions, or hide behind slogans? Will I stay curious, or collapse into certainty? This decision defines more than your day. It defines your dignity. Bonhoeffer asked a haunting question. Who stands firm when all else crumbles? And maybe that's you, not because you're smarter, not because you're louder, but because you choose every day to remain awake in a world that rewards sleep. You won't get a medal. You won't go viral. But you'll have something the world can't give and the algorithm can't fake. A mind that is truly yours. Here's the final challenge. Pick one belief you hold tightly and spend 30 minutes exploring the best arguments against it, not to torture yourself, but to train your mind, to stay human in a system that's trying to automate you, because the war for your mind isn't coming, it's already here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button.